Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 18th, 2024. I know this channel is quite small and I only have a few thousand subscribers, but still, I do understand that people watch this video from all around the world, and I think only about half of the people watching this video come from the Americas, so I think it's always important that I take into account this global dimension. And I think this is reflected when I try not to stick to one time zone. You know, when I was doing horoscopes for a cell phone company years ago, I was only working on one time zone. I knew that everyone watching me was was when I was doing I was doing premium recordings for each of the 12 signs plus text messages for the signs, but I knew that everyone listening to my recordings came from the UK. This time it is different, and I suppose that's also reflected in what I talk about. You know, it's so easy to talk about Trump and what's going on in the US because I know that, people are aware of that. And like yesterday I talked about Princess Catherine, because everyone knows about Princess Catherine. But there are other things going on in the world. And for example, one of my commenters, someone commenting on my video yesterday, mentioned that the Vice President of Malawi has just been killed in a plane crash. That happened on June the 10th. And to my shame, I didn't know about this. And so I thought, well, let's have a look at what's going on. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about in this video is the Vice President of Malawi and what was happening in the plane crash. And his name was Saulos Chilima. Now, apparently he was a much-loved politician who was, I don't know, is any politician much loved? Probably not, and probably exaggerating there. But he was in line perhaps to be president. And so for many people that's a great tragedy. So I'm going to be looking at that plane crash. And I'm also going to be looking at something more sort of mainstream, if you like. That is Trump's vice presidential picks. And I'm going to focus on three people who I think have been named as possible picks. And they are Doug Burgum, who is governor of North Dakota, and there's Marco Rubio, who's obviously a senator from Florida, and also Tim Scott, a senator from South Carolina. These three people, I don't have times of birth for them. It's always somewhat depressing looking at charts when I don't have a time of birth, but I'm going to see if I can come up with anything suggest which one might be the better candidate. Or maybe none of them are any good. I don't know. Or maybe it doesn't really matter for the vice presidential pick. But okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about later in the video. Oh, by the way, I should say, if you do like this video, I would be very grateful if you were to indicate it by pressing the like button. And if you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you were to subscribe, assuming, of course, you like the content of this video. Anyway, let's look at what is going on today. So here is the chart for today. By the way, those four people up there from top left, we've got Marco Rubio, there is Tim Scott, top right. Bottom left, that is not a vice presidential candidate, that is Saulos Chilima, who was the vice president of Malawi. And then bottom right is Doug Burgum. I think he's the actual favourite at the moment to be Trump's vice presidential candidate. I hadn't really heard of him until yesterday, but apparently he's got lots of money. That's always important, isn't it? So here is the chart we can for today, set for noon. Not a great deal going on today, actually. We got the moon in Scorpio, right in the middle of Scorpio. So today we don't really have to worry about time zones because the moon is going to be in Scorpio all day long. and it makes trine aspect to Saturn, and it makes an opposition aspect to Uranus. So with a moon in Scorpio, moon in 17 Scorpio, okay, it's moving out of the Via Combusta. So remember, the Via Combusta is the part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, and in the Via Combusta, things can happen that we weren't perhaps expecting. So I don't know what the last couple of days were like. Were they a bit difficult? Things happening which you hadn't planned for. So that is certainly a possibility. And now that the moon is in Scorpio, moon is in late Scorpio, there may just be a feeling that things are calming down, perhaps calming down a little on the emotional level as well, not just in terms of events. And moon trine Saturn, it's quite a stabilizing influence. Though, to be fair, the moon is making an opposition to Uranus. Now, that moon opposition to Uranus is going to be more if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, I don't think you're really going to pick up on it much today. So that moon opposition Uranus can bring a little bit of instability. Things just happening that we weren't really expecting. And because the moon in Scorpio is in a fixed sign, Uranus in Taurus is in a fixed sign, then there might be a certain amount of stubbornness, people digging their heels in. That is a possibility. People getting angry for no reason at all. Again, that is another possibility. But not a lot going on in terms of main aspects. I suppose we could say that Venus is quincunx Pluto. So quincunx, that's a 150 degree aspect, two planets that are 5 signs apart. And so a quincunx is not really a particularly fortunate aspect. It can be about a certain sense of dis-ease. There's Venus in Cancer. That's a very warm, fuzzy, nice place for Venus to be in. It can be a little bit sentimental, trying to relate, trying to be comfortable. Then it comes up against Pluto in Aquarius. So we might be trying our hardest to be warm and pleasant, but there's a certain problem. There's maybe we feel that other people are being too detached and are not reciprocating our feelings. I suppose that would make sense because it also connects with moon trine Saturn. I mean, the moon trine Saturn aspect is good, but it is about control, making sure that our feelings don't get out of control. So there is a bit of disease with Venus quincunx Pluto. People might be a little bit obsessed about certain things, and that might spoil relationships. Could be obsessed about money, because Venus can be the ruler of money. Venus Venus is actually making another aspect, and that is Venus is making a decal to Uranus. So Venus and Uranus are 36 degrees apart. So that means that some harmonic, Venus, Uranus and Pluto are kind of connected. It might not be immediately obvious, but I think at some harmonic they would be connected. But right now I can't think about which harmonic that. My mind's gone blank about what harmonic that is. But Venus is 36 degrees from Uranus, so that is a decile. That is 1/10 of the circle, 36 degrees, and so it's like that we're struggling to manifest a vision of independence. Yes, we understand that people matter, that relationships matter, that we're not on this planet alone, but at the same time, we do want to assert our independence, and it's not entirely easy. Yeah, sure, we have a vision of how we'd like things to be, but there's a bit of a struggle there. So So Venus does get hit by a couple of minor aspects, the quincunx with Pluto and the semi-sextile with Pluto. And I suppose while I'm also at it, I have to point out that Venus is semi-square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So the Mars-Uranus midpoint is at around 16 Taurus. So Venus is semi-square Venus. Mars-Uranus midpoint is around 16 Taurus. Venus is semi-square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So that perhaps gives us further evidence that our independence is going to be important. Venus hitting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Mars-Uranus is certainly independent, likes to do things its way, sometimes likes to violently do things its way. And so, if anyone tries to hold us back, tries to tell us what to do, we might not appreciate it. And so, so there is stuff going on with Venus which is not immediately apparent. Now, turning to the heliocentric horoscope, so let's switch to different settings. There we go. That is the heliocentric view. So from a heliocentric perspective, we notice now that Earth is exactly Earth is exactly square Neptune. Now we get the same kind of information from a geocentric chart, because from a geocentric perspective, the Sun is sort of square Neptune, but it's moving. No, it's not. It is. The Sun is actually moving to a square of Neptune. And so we just kind of get the same information, but from a heliocentric perspective. And maybe it's more poignant, the Earth, the planet Earth, where we are. So you imagine the solar system, the Sun is in the middle of the solar system. And the Earth and Neptune are 90 degrees apart. And so, as I've said on many occasions with Neptune can be about floods, it can be about water damage. Neptune is close to the fixed star Skeet, and we've got Earth square Neptune. So water is a problem. Yeah, Neptune close to the fixed star Skeet. Skeet is about disaster, shipwrecks. Not a day for doing anything dangerous with water, whether it's sailing, playing with your plumbing system, unless you really know what you're doing. So you need to be careful on that score. And I think that's it. I think that's the main thing going on from a heliocentric view. I probably missed something, but that's it. So it's now time to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 18th, 2024. Aries, you are still in a mood where you're not really inclined to ingratiate yourself with other people. That does seem to be the thing to do very often, to make people like you. What do you want to do to make people like you? But right now, Aries, I don't think you want to do anything. I think you really just want to be yourself, and you want everything to be, I suppose, properly organized, and you don't want any complications. So really, Aries, it is not a particularly interesting day, and I think you're happy with that. I don't think you want anything to happen. I think that you're starting to get comfortable, or rather, you'd like to start to get comfortable. Venus and Mercury are now in Cancer. They are moving into a sign which, from an Aries perspective, is pretty low profile. You don't want attention. You feel that there are better things to do. And at the same time, Mars, your ruler, is now really setting up shop in the sign Taurus. Taurus is a fixed sign. It's Earth sign. You're just, not really inclined to do anything dramatic. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it's a day when you should be doing nothing. I think there actually are things that you should be doing. And I know that Aries has a reputation for being straightforward. There are some books which describe the 12 signs as some kind of journey, and Aries is the beginning of the journey because it's the first sign. It's like Aries is the first impulse. There's something perhaps a bit childish about Aries because it's the first impulse. Well, today you can forget that. You are, if anything, making things complicated, and there's even something about you that may be a little bit jaded. You've seen it all before, and things can't be trusted on the surface. You're not going to trust people today, I don't think. And so, Aries, it might be a good idea to start to understand what the picture is. Now, I don't want to encourage you to go for sort of conspiracy theories or to be completely mistrusting, but you never know with conspiracy theories, do you? I mean, you think it's all nonsense. You try to use Occam's razor. Occam's razor is, of all the possibilities, you take the most straightforward. So if you see a flashing light, a light racing across the sky, you firstly go for the obvious possibility that it's just an aeroplane moving quickly. You don't immediately jump to the conclusion that it's a UFO from Alpha Centauri. You just don't do that. That's Occam's razor. You keep it simple, and you go for the most obvious and reasonable explanation. But I don't think that's what you want to do. I think you do want to look at things from a fairly complicated view. Now, that is fine, and I think it's good, but obviously don't make it complicated for the sake of it. And perhaps that's what you need to do. You need to do some research. So if you have some idea about a conspiracy, or you suspect something, don't jump to conclusions. And I think that is an important point. I think that many Arians today are going to feel a bit suspicious. Something's not right. And if you do feel like that, don't jump to conclusions. It is important to do your research. And by doing your research, you have the opportunity to find out the underlying truth of the matter. And so we can perhaps see how this research works, because firstly, the moon makes a trine to Saturn. That's about doing the hard work, getting to the bottom of things. And then the moon makes an opposition to Uranus, and that's perhaps finding the answer, finding what you are looking for. Taurus, you are still in a state where you feel that other people are important. You just can't get it out of your head. You can't just be yourself. And I think your subjective feelings about this may have actually some objective reality. There are people out there who can't be avoided, and at the same time, I think that you can benefit from having contact with certain people. I mean, people who are perhaps a bit older and wiser than you, and who might be prepared to give good advice, who might also be able to in some way stabilize the situation. But do keep moving. You don't want to spend time in one place for too long. There is a temptation to do that with Moon in Scorpio. Scorpio Moon, remember Moon is in Scorpio, which is your Scorpio is your opposite sign. So with Moon in Scorpio, you could spend time in one place and with one group of people, and it just could become too much of a good thing. So a little bit of variety would be a good idea, but obviously there are going to be limits. Moon is in Scorpio. It is a fixed sign. Now, Venus is the ruler of Taurus. And there are a couple of things with Venus, going on with Venus that I think you need to be aware of. For one thing, Venus is quincunx Pluto. So you may feel that there are things you would like to say and like to communicate, and you can communicate on many different levels, not least the emotional level, because Venus is in Cancer. So you're perhaps thinking that it should be straightforward. People will understand the way you feel, but maybe not. There may be a certain obtuseness. People are just focusing on something that you're not focusing on, and you may actually feel that some people may actually be deliberately ignoring you. Because it feels better for them that way. They don't want to listen to your message. Don't worry about it too much. And if you do find that you are being ignored, or that you feel there's something you need to be saying or communicating, and no one's prepared to listen, with Venus making a decile to Uranus, remember that 36-degree aspect between Venus and Uranus? With that decile to Uranus, you're able to make things happen. You can firstly see it happening in your head. You can just imagine what would happen if you were to do this, how people would respond. And then, with a bit of effort, you can actually make it happen out there in the real world. And it could be very disruptive, that is true. But maybe you feel that's the right thing to do. Though don't take things too far. I think some Taurians, perhaps out of frustration, may find that they lose control. They get into something that's too much for them, and things get out of control, and I suppose there might be embarrassment, or if we're dealing with the physical world, I mean, if you are doing something out of frustration, I don't know, let's say you want to use a power tool because you're annoyed with the world, and you decide the best way to get out your annoyance is to use some power tool to, I don't know what you do with power tools, you knock down a wall or whatever, then someone could get hurt. Indeed, I think accidents could happen today if you are not careful. So it's certainly not a day for doing anything dangerous. And I think the reason you're attracting danger is because I think at some level you are a little bit frustrated. And I think it perhaps is connected with that Venus decile Uranus. You want something to happen. You want to be able to communicate something. And you've got an idea, but it's not easy. And you may feel you have to take things too far to express yourself. And in the process, that could cause problems. But I don't want to overstate today. I'm not saying it's an especially dramatic day, or it needn't be an especially dramatic day. And really, it's a similar picture for most people. Overall, astrologically, there's not a lot going on. Gemini. I think Gemini, things are starting to change. You're getting actually used to the fact that the Gemini season is kind of coming to an end. The planets are leaving Gemini all the time. I suppose you could say that the Gemini party, people are leaving the party now. It's whatever. It's now 3:00 in the morning, and there aren't as many people there as there used to be. or, the Sun, Venus has left for party. Venus has gone into Cancer. Mercury's left for party. Oh, it's also gone into Cancer. The Moon left for party a long time ago. And so you might feel that things perhaps aren't quite as exciting as they used to be. And then you're realizing that the Sun is going to leave the party very soon, because the Sun is going to go into Cancer on Thursday or Friday. So Geminis may feel actually a little bit bored. Don't worry, I'm not singling you out. And I'm a Gemini myself, so I'm quite aware of this issue. And the moon is now in Scorpio. It's not really in a Gemini-friendly sign, all things being equal. And perhaps Gemini, you're just aware that there are things that need to be done, things which on the face of it are not particularly exciting, especially as that moon in Scorpio is making a trine aspect to Saturn. Now, trine is a fortunate aspect, and Saturn is in Pisces. It's in a high-profile part of your chart. So that moon trine Saturn may be a little boring, but it can certainly be useful. It allows Geminis to get things done. Get things done in a way where no one bothers you. Now, that might irritate you as well, that people don't notice what you're doing. You might be asking, well, why aren't you getting any help? Don't other people care? But it's fine. You're able to do things in your own way, at your own pace. And there's no hurry. And the actions you take could be useful from a perspective of getting things done, in terms of boosting your status in the long term. Short term, with this moon trine Saturn, I don't think you're going to get much recognition. Indeed, I don't think you're going to get any recognition, but it doesn't matter. You'll be able to start building something, building the groundwork for future advances. So, Gemini, I think in many cases you just know what needs to be done, and that's it. Though I don't want to be totally pessimistic about the social situation and the way you respond to other people. When people get to know you, when people get close to you, they realize that actually you're quite a nice person, and that you're quite welcoming, and you're not quite as standoffish as you seem on the surface. And so it's worth seeing what you can do on a social level. Do try getting close to people, within reason, of course, because it will become obvious at a certain level that you've got something to offer, and also actually that you're, believe it or not, a fairly down-to-earth, responsible person. So see if you can create new contacts, create new connections today. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think if you can get close to people, you might be pleasantly surprised by the results. Cancer. I don't think it's going to be a dramatic day, but I think it could actually be quite a useful day. The moon is in Scorpio, and remember, moon is your ruler. So with the moon in Scorpio, moving into the last half of Scorpio, generally speaking, the last half of Scorpio is easier than the first half of Scorpio. The first half of Scorpio is, it's a via combustor. Things can happen. Things happen, but we weren't really expecting, and so can be a bit unstable. But with the moon going into late Scorpio, you're feeling yourself to be more in control, and at the same time, if there's anything you want to do, something you've been yearning to do, maybe of a creative nature, then now is the time to do it, especially as the moon is trine Saturn. That moon trine Saturn is about stabilizing things. So if things have been a bit chaotic recently, you're in a great position to sort of bring them down to earth, and perhaps you can address the complications. So if there has been recent instability, it might just have been because people were not in control of their own feelings, they were misunderstanding their feelings, they were misusing their feelings. But you as a Cancerian, you of all people, really do understand the emotional dimension. And right now you are in control. Mercury and Venus are now in your sign. That puts you in a strong position. Emotionally, you control the vertical, you control the horizontal, as they say. And we also have the moon in Scorpio, a water sign. Saturn in Pisces, a water sign. There's a lot of stuff in water, and the moon and Saturn are having a favourable impact on your sign, and I think that you can really start to take control of things. And the emotional side of things is something you are familiar with. And in terms of relationships, the moon is trine Saturn, and that I think is very useful because the moon is your ruler. Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, which is your opposite sign. So when we have moon trine Saturn, you and someone else just relate to each other. Really, nothing has to be said. Though later in the day, certainly if you're in the Americas, the moon is starting to make an opposition to Uranus, and there could be a little bit of instability, particularly if you're trying to do something that's really important to you. You've been doing this and that, and then suddenly you realize it is something you want to do. It's all about you, and you want to do it. It matters, but there might be a bit of friction. People not leaving you, people not leaving you alone. There could be aggravation, maybe from friends, people who know you, wanting attention, and somehow you've got to resist that. I think it's just important that you do what's important to you without allowing external events to disrupt you, particularly as it does seem that you're quite close to finishing something off. And if you do find, especially towards the end of the day, that you are finishing something off and it matters to you, make sure that there aren't any interruptions or disturbances. Leo. It is another day when you're not really in the mood for wild socializing. It just doesn't appeal to you. And I think you should just accept the situation. What you don't want to do is impose your views and your state of mind onto the outside world. We are all different. We are running on different clocks, not just different time zones. And I think, Leo, you just do have to understand your pace. And your pace today is pretty slow. And I think that there are things you would like to engage with, but if they are constructive and positive, they probably don't involve other people. So there may be things that you're trying to work out in your own way, and you don't really need any help. And you certainly shouldn't be trying to inflict your view of the world onto others. And by the same token, I suppose you don't want them to inflict their view onto you, which, I suppose could happen. Something out there, something that you shouldn't really be worried about, might make its presence felt, and there might be sort of a moment of irritation, or perhaps even panic. Got to do something, got to respond. You haven't got to respond. There's no need to respond. Okay, in some cases it really is necessary to respond. If your house is on fire, sure, you've got to respond, but there may be a few fake emergencies today, emergencies which are not emergencies. Of course, you have to assume that everything is an emergency until you've got evidence of the contrary, but don't overreact to what people say. Just be calm, and I think that will be appreciated. And there is this moon trine Saturn, and that moon trine Saturn could be quite useful with the right relationships. Yeah, probably the kind of relationship that you're already in. A relationship where there is a lot of understanding and respect. And if there is a relationship with a lot of understanding and respect, then emotionally things should flow quite well. If you're talking about new relationships or people you don't know very well, then I'm not convinced that things are going to work out. But don't worry, tomorrow's another day. Virgo. I think, Virgo, you are a force for good today. I think that you can bring things down to earth. I don't think that it's an especially dramatic day. I think, you have your way of working. If people want to follow this way of working, fair enough. If they don't, then just don't worry about it. The social environment does matter to some extent because there is a trine aspect between the moon and Saturn. Remember, Saturn is in Pisces. Pisces is your opposite sign. So with Saturn in Pisces over the last year and more, relationships have been important. You have understood the limitations of relationships. You've perhaps realized that some people are not as great as you'd hoped, but maybe people are not as great as you'd hoped. That's just the way it is. And with the moon trine Saturn, you may be starting to get the first benefits, or okay, I won't say the first benefits, but it's like the benefits of your realization. You don't have high expectations of other people, and that's good. And because you don't have high expectations of other people, you can be involved with people and not be pushing them, not be asking questions, not making demands, and it's just very comfortable. And the moon is in Scorpio, and it's an emotionally aware sign, and I think, Virgo, actually you are emotionally aware, and I think that your emotional awareness is going to carry you through the day. And really, that's pretty much it. There's not a great deal going on today, but there's not actually a great deal going on today, all things being equal, for many of the signs. It's quite a quiet day, and I think as a Virgo, I think that you probably appreciate that. Virgos don't really want excitement, especially on a day like this. And really, that's it. Libra. Libra, you have Venus quincunx Pluto. Now, the quincunx is traditionally seen as being a minor aspect. It happens when two planets are 5 signs apart. And so with Venus quincunx Pluto, there's something a bit uneasy about today. You want to be yourself. You want to be with people who are on your wavelength. And it kind of feels straightforward, but something's bothering you. And I think what is bothering you with this Venus quincunx Pluto is something to do with a detail. There just may be a few details which maybe you don't really have to worry about, but still you are worrying about them. and that is creating a disturbance. Now, Librans can be very self-conscious, especially when dealing with other people. They may be thinking, well, what does this person think of me? I made this mistake yesterday, and do they still remember? Are they holding it against me? And how is this person going to relate to that person? You know, this kind of thing that Librans can worry about, the whole social dynamic. And maybe you are overthinking the social dynamic. So that really is possible. Though there might actually be a more constructive side to this quincunx. The quincunx may be actually reminding you of something. And what it might be reminding you of is really not to forget yourself. You know, you can be trying very hard to fit in. Venus is in Cancer. It's actually a very high-profile sign from a Libran view. And you may be trying your hardest to get on with people and to do the right thing. But what about you? That Pluto may be a reminder that you are a unique individual, and that if you spend too long trying to do what other people want, trying to fit in, you'll be forgetting about yourself and your needs. And your needs, particularly to do something special. What is that special thing you're on the planet for? What talents were you born with? Are you using those talents? Maybe you're not. At least maybe today you're not, because you're worrying too much about how people see you, your status, whether or not you're winning or losing some power struggle. So these worries about how you're perceived shouldn't overshadow your actual concerns about who you are, because who you are is what matters. So in that sense, Libra, I would suggest that you do consider yourself and what you're good at, and don't forget what makes you special. Now, while this is going on, there may be some stuff going on with money, because the moon is trine Saturn. The moon's in Scorpio, and with the moon in Scorpio, many Librans are thinking about what they have and what they don't have, whether they're making enough money, whether there are ways of making more money. And I think these thoughts are actually quite constructive. Money, I know that money is something we're not supposed to think about, that it's somehow beneath us to think about money. But you could argue that money is some kind of token of how we are appreciated, like it or not. And when someone pays us money, they're showing that they appreciate us. When someone is paying us not enough money, that may suggest that they are disrespecting us. So perhaps you need to see money like that, as a token. And with Moon trine Saturn, I think that there are actually things you can do to regulate your financial universe and making sure that you are respected. Remember, money is respect. It's a token of respect, even if it seems to be completely impersonal. Like some large organization paying us money every month for one particular reason or another, or indeed asking us for money. But money we pay is a matter of respect. So if you are giving someone money, it shows you to what extent you respect them or don't respect them. So try to think about money in a new way. And by thinking about money in a new way, I think the money as an energy will sort of appreciate it. And that might be an opportunity there to perhaps make more money, or to be perhaps more comfortable with the money that's coming in. But don't ignore the financial dimension. I think there is work to be done there, and I think with the moon trine Saturn, if you're honest with yourself, recently. There's something financially that has been making you uncomfortable. And today you can address the issue and perhaps make things a lot easier for yourself. Scorpio. Mars is now very well established in Taurus, your opposite sign. I don't think it's great that Mars is in Taurus. There are better places for Mars to be, and you might feel that this is a time when you don't really have as much control as you'd like to have. That might bother you, though I think it's not bothering you today as much as it was bothering you a few days ago. I think you're more familiar with the situation, more comfortable with it, and I think that you're helped by the fact that the moon is in Scorpio, your sign. I've had discussions with people on the comments about this moon in Scorpio, whether it's a good or a bad thing if you're a Scorpio, and I think it certainly is a good thing. I think that seems to be the general consensus, and it's especially good that the moon is in Scorpio and it is trine Saturn. That is a stabilizing influence, I would have said, this moon trine Saturn. Things can be brought down to earth, and we can have a greater sense that we are being respected. There has been a little bit of disrespect in the past, and some of it imagined, though, because when the moon is when Mars is in Taurus, which is, of course, Taurus is Scorpio's opposite sign. So with Mars in Taurus, some Scorpios might feel that they're having to do things other people's way, that you're not getting enough appreciation. But I think you're now having a better understanding about what is going on here, and there is a sense in which you can be respected for what you do, and people are starting to realize what you're doing and why it's special. They're not showing their appreciation in overt ways, but if you're sensitive and if you look at the signs, you are starting to be aware that you really are being appreciated, and perhaps it's the beginning of a new level of appreciation, which I think that you're starting to feel good about it. But it is very slow, and at the same time, don't underestimate the impact you can have on other people. You have a charm. It may be a slow charm, but it is a real charm, and as people get to know you, they start to gravitate around you. I think there's just something about you that makes people feel good about themselves. And so if there's been recent disharmony, if there's been any conflict around you, wherever it might be, whether it's at home or at work, in your social life, if there has been any conflict and disagreement, you may actually be the person to sort it out, because you can look beyond the petty details, and that's really what you can do today. Indeed, I think it's really started with Venus and Mercury moving into Cancer. So that happened yesterday. And now that Venus and Mercury really are in Cancer, you can look beyond petty squabbles. Things that bothered you yesterday, or at least the day before, they don't bother you anymore, because you're now seeing the big picture. And because you can see the big picture, because you can look beyond petty disagreements, you can kind of be a unifying force. So look at where you stand in your environment, and where your position is in the network, whatever that network might be, and see how you can bring people together and create a fair amount of harmony and even happiness. Sagittarius. It's a day when you do have some choices. You can do what's easy, or you can make the effort. So if you do what is easy, then maybe, Sagittarius, you don't actually have to do anything at all. You can just let other people do the work. You can maybe just drift into the background and watch things from afar and perhaps just prepare. Moon does go into Sagittarius soon, but not today. Tomorrow the moon will be in Sagittarius, but for the moment you can just be yourself. And if you're ignored, no one's interested in you, I don't think you're particularly going to care. Yet, Jupiter is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. That does give you an opportunity. I think it's a kind of an optional thing, Jupiter being conjunct the Mercury-Mars midpoint. Take it or leave it. But this conjunction, from your perspective, Sagittarius, is probably the most important event of the day. You know, Mercury-Mars as a pair are about saying what's on your mind in no uncertain terms and using the force of your personality to get your ideas out there. And so with Jupiter on conjunct the Mercury-Mars midpoint, you can certainly make things happen if you want through the power of your words. But I do think that it is optional. I don't think you have to do it if you don't want to do it, if the situation isn't right. And, you know, with a moon in Scorpio, you are sensitive. You do understand what makes people tick. And you perhaps take the view that the people around you are quite sensitive. And if you were to say the wrong thing, they might get upset. And if that's the way you feel, fair enough. But maybe, Sagittarius, you want to stir things up. And that is Sagittarius. I mean, Sagittarius likes to say things, and often Sagittarius couldn't care less what the results are. There's a tactlessness to Sagittarius. Now, I don't think that tactlessness is strongly emphasized today, because I do think that moon is in Scorpio. That gives you, I think, emotional sensitivity, plus it's trine Saturn, and Saturn is about responsibility and discipline, and so you are able to exercise self-control, and that's good. But there may be a situation where you feel that it is the right thing to use your words to make things happen. And yeah, consider that possibility. So if you're in a situation where you're unhappy about something, where you feel that things aren't going your way and you happen to be getting impatient, then you say what's on your mind. And the things you say will, I think, have a very powerful impact, and you can make things happen. You know, Jupiter on the Mercury-Mars midpoint it's fortunate, and you can get your ideas out as well. Again, if you want to get your ideas out, and I think that people are going to be very appreciative. But though maybe, Sagittarius, you don't have to say everything. You can perhaps get some of your ideas out, but maybe the important ideas, the core of the thing, can be held back for later. And at the same time, Sagittarius, you know, I've talked about the potential for excitement, perhaps causing excitement through the things you say. You shouldn't forget basic security concerns. That sounds a bit negative. I don't mean that in a negative sense, because the moon is trine Saturn. This is a time, Sagittarius, when you can create stability for yourself. You can put yourself and the things that are important to you on firm footing. And it's just going to be easy. And I suppose when you're not being disturbed, when you're just when people just let you get on with it, you can take the steps that are needed. And so, Sagittarius, that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Today you have a lot of choices. But the fundamental choice is this. Do you want a quiet life, or do you want to stir things up? Or maybe you can have both. There may be moments when you can be dramatic and get people to listen to you, but there are going to be other moments, perhaps the longer moments, when you can just create real stability for yourself. Capricorn. Capricorn, you are in a fairly relaxed state of mind for a Capricorn. Capricorns do like to relax. It is important to them. And today, I don't think that there's anything really that you have to do. And I think that you have an opportunity to enjoy people's company. Remember that yesterday we had Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer. And sort of Cancer is your opposite sign. So with Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer, you have an opportunity to get on with people, to listen to what they're saying, and at the same time, I think you can actually learn from them. Now, there are things that maybe you don't fully understand, and you've taken things as far as you can, and maybe it's a time when you need to just observe or at least get outside opinions. And when you get those outside opinions, things will start to clarify. But I'm not really talking about you necessarily having to go out and ask for opinions. You can sometimes get opinions without actually having to ask for them. So you know what you need to know, or rather you know what you don't know, and now it's just a time to watch and listen to what people are saying, and even watch what they're doing. And through this process of observation, Capricorn, you might start to get familiar with what's going on, and you might become more certain in yourself about what is right, what's wrong, and what needs to be done. In terms of relationships, today there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Saturn. So, of course, Saturn is your ruler. It's in Pisces. And the Moon rules Cancer, your opposite sign. So if you've got Moon trine Saturn, that indicates that in terms of relationships, there could be a certain amount of understanding and stability. It's because you and someone else really are on the same wavelength. And creating that stability is important, regardless of what the relationship is, because if there is stability, that is going to allow you to take a few risks. If you're in a relationship which is unstable, you can't really take risks, can you? Because then things could just blow up. But if you stabilize things, then you can take risks. Then you can, make criticisms, make suggestions. Because the reason I'm saying this is because the Moon is actually also making an opposition to Uranus. So that opposition to Uranus is more late in the day, more if you're in the Americas. And with this Moon opposition Uranus, you may find that someone is nervous about something. That may not affect you directly, but someone is agitated. And, this agitation could be disruptive if you take it too seriously. Rather, you need to accept that people are not going to be calm and stable all the time. And with Moon opposition Uranus, this tension maybe slowly starts to increase as the day progresses. I don't think it need be a problem because the Moon does make a trine to Saturn before it makes an opposition to Uranus. So just be aware of that things aren't going to be quite as stable as you expect, and it might just happen right at the end of the day when you least expect it. Finally, Capricorn, there may be a situation today where you feel that just things aren't good enough, and it's not going to happen to every Capricorn, but you should be prepared for it, because if you so wish, you can change everything. There is this, I don't know, I never really played video games, but those games where you press a button and you go into hyperspace, the screen clears. I don't know, I remember playing a game like that in the early 80s, but it's kind of like that. There is a hyperspace button today. And if you're in a situation that just is not to your liking and that people are behaving in a way you don't like, then you can press the hyperspace button. But this is not really, I don't know if hyperspace button is quite the right word, because it's not like you disappear and you move somewhere else. It's just you change things and everything around you changes. Because you're able to bring to bear the full force of your personality, the full dramatic force of your personality. And in doing so, it is incredibly destructive. No, not incredibly destructive, that's the wrong word. Incredibly disruptive. And I suppose it could be destructive if taken to extreme limits, but I think it's more disruptive. You're able to bring to bear enormous disruption today, if you want to. And people will listen. People will just perhaps be a little bit shocked, but in the end, you can make things happen your way. But don't press the button unless you feel that you really have to. Aquarius. I believe Aquarius, it's going to be a pretty useful day. You know what's going on. People are going to respect you, and I don't think you'll have any real difficulty establishing your authority. You do have real authority today. You don't have to be dramatic about it. I mean, you can be dramatic about it if you really want to be, but I don't think you have to be. Just be very clear about what you want, and things should just naturally fit into that clarity. So it's going to be a useful day, and if you happen to be working or you're concerned about getting results, whatever those results are, you can certainly get those results, and you're going to be helped by a real sense of discipline. You just know what needs to be done, and you're not going to allow emotional concerns to get in your way. Now, in the process, you might ruffle a few feathers. It's not really what people want. People would like to do things their way. It's still the beginning of a week. I know it's a Tuesday, but they might just feel that they just wanted to do nothing. But if you happen to be in a position of leadership, Aquarius, then you do get your way. I think that while you understand the emotional dimension and you understand people's sensibilities, you're not going to be too bothered if you do cause a bit of upset, and it is true, Aquarius, that in certain situations you might cause someone to sort of slightly reconsider their relationship with you. They might take the view, hold on, I thought you were like this, but actually you're like that, and I don't know if I want to be your friend anymore. Well, I mean, that's a worst case scenario. Because, as far as you're concerned, Aquarius, you have to do what you have to do. And your focus and your discipline is going to be great. And at the same time, you're going to be very good at understanding the financial implications of things. So if something is being planned or considered, you will immediately know how much it will cost and what the financial implications could be further down the line. And so if you want to limit expenditure or point out to people that something is going to be more expensive than they realize, now might be the time to do it. And I think that you will get noticed, maybe not liked, but you will get your way. And really, Aquarius, that's about it. I think that you do have a certain toughness today, actually. I don't think that it's a day for making friends. I think it's a day for getting respect. But in terms of the emotional side of things, yeah, it is an emotional day, but I don't think you're not going to get caught up in these feelings. You understand the emotional dimension, but as far as you're concerned, there are things that have to be done, and human feelings shouldn't completely dominate proceedings. Pisces. There is a lot of stuff happening in water signs at the moment. We've got the moon in Scorpio. We had moon in Scorpio yesterday. We've now got Venus and Mercury in Cancer. And of course, we've had Saturn in Pisces for a long time. So, we've got 5 planets in water signs. So moon, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury, and Venus. So from a Piscean perspective, that's a good thing. It means that things are flowing. If you want things to be done, they can be done. And you also have a certain amount of control. You've always had control, but today it's going to be particularly clear that you've got control, and I think just people are going to listen to you. And also, if you have ideas, perhaps deeply held ideas, now might be a time when you can actually start to work on these ideas and actually make them happen. And you're going to be helped by the fact that if you want, you're going to be able to communicate with great power. This is because Jupiter, which is your ruler, is conjunct the Mercury-Mars midpoint. Mercury-Mars is about expression, expressing yourself with great power. Jupiter conjunct the Mercury-Mars midpoint is Pisces expressing itself with great power and great conviction. So if something needs to be said, Pisces, I think now really is a time to say it. I can't see anything going wrong. Well, okay, things can always go wrong, but if any time is the right time, then now is surely the right time. So perhaps you need to take advantage of this opportunity and to tell people what is on your mind. And I think you'll be helped by the fact that you will be coming from a position of responsibility. Your fundamental impulse will be about making things safe and secure, making sure everyone is grounded. That's what you want. You just want some stability. And it may actually be the case that if you really want stability, if you want to be safe and secure, short term, you may have to create a little bit of instability. Getting people to sit up and listen, getting people to think, suggesting to them, well, if you keep on doing it like this, then, things could go wrong. Everyone could suffer. So I suppose that might require a little bit of bravery, getting people to take attention, but getting people to pay attention to what is going on. But I think they'll understand. I think that you're going to be able to deliver your message with a certain amount of sensitivity. And I don't think anyone is going to be too badly upset by this. Of course, it may be that you feel that everything is fine and that nothing needs to be said, and that you can just do your bit, perhaps make sure that your little part of the world is well organized and is all in shape, and you're not going to worry too much about what other people are doing, and that might be fine. But you do have to consider the situation, and if something needs to be said, then I think now might be the time to say it. And those are my forecasts of the 12 signs. You will perhaps have noticed that I have been relatively brief. The reason I've been relatively brief is because really there's not a great deal going on. The main direct aspect is a trine between the moon and Saturn. And that aspect, the moon's trine Saturn, is not particularly dramatic. It's useful, but I don't want to say more than I have to in terms of the 12 signs. So now I'm going to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number, hexagram number 49. Revolution. Thing is, this hexagram, it doesn't move. It's locked. None of those lines move. So there's no second hexagram. And I do think that this reflects what I was talking about with the astrology. I've just mentioned that astrologically there's not much going on today. Moon trine Saturn is the main aspect. And so the fact that we've got a locked hexagram is kind of more of the same. I know that revolution sounds quite dramatic, and I think that many of us feel that it is time for a revolution, that something needs to be changed, that something is not right. If we're involved with other people and we have structures of authority and hierarchy, we may be thinking that these structures aren't really working, but someone needs to be toppled. And it's probably true. We're all thinking like that, aren't we? I suppose it's election season. You've got elections in the UK, you've got elections in France. I suppose eventually you'll have elections in the US. People are concerned about their governments, and they're thinking, what can I do to change the government? But there's also government at a local level. There's government in the family. There's government in terms of our friends. There's internal government, isn't there? There's how we organise our own lives, how we think about things. Something needs to change. And I suppose when we're talking about change can be a projection. We think we want to change the government, but really maybe what really needs to be changed is ourselves and our attitude. We might think that external events changing means that we don't have to do anything. We can just go on as normal. That's not necessarily the case. So first of all, we need to think about ourselves and what we're doing wrong, if we're doing anything wrong, and thinking about changing, I don't know, our habits, our routines, what we do, what we eat, who we meet, who we talk to, our interests, bad habits. All of this stuff should be up for change. It is revolution, but where is the change? How are we actually going to make it happen? And the I Ching today doesn't answer that question in a way. It just says, no, there's a feeling we need to have a revolution, but where's it actually going? So there may be a feeling that it's a revolution that is kind of halted. And when looking at this hexagram, the revolution, we need to actually look at the internal hexagram, the nuclear hexagram. Nuclear hexagram, remember, you form a nuclear hexagram by knocking off the top and bottom line. So you look at the lines in the middle. So you take the 4th, 5th and 6th lines as being the top hexagram, and you take the 2nd, 3rd and 4th as being the top trigram, and you take the 2nd, 3rd and 4th lines as being the bottom trigram. And so there is your nuclear hexagram, which underlies the revolution. So you can see the similarities between the two, which underlies it, coming to meet. It's about people imposing themselves on us, and it can be about us not having independence. And I think this might actually underlie the whole thing. We are not as independent as we should be. We've allowed people to have a certain amount of control over us. We've allowed people to make decisions on our behalf. And we're not fully in control. And so this is perhaps where the revolution comes in. The revolution is about seeing how we have allowed ourselves to be controlled, how we have, in a way, given up our own independence. And the challenge here is to find our freedom. It is to break free. But remember, this is revolution in a very Confucian way. You have a revolution not because you're trying to overthrow society, but actually because you're trying to protect society. Society needs to be flexible. If you have structures that never change, society becomes rotten and it falls in on itself. And so revolution is about making the changes that are required in order to preserve the system. But anyway, there's not a great deal to say because it is a locked hexagram. It's not moving, but I think we need to consider what needs to be changed. We don't feel like changing. We don't have to change it because it's locked, but I think we need to consider what has become stagnant and how perhaps our independence may be being restricted, and what changes we need to make in the future. And that's it for the I Ching. And I now want to go back to the astrology, and I want to consider the Vice President of Malawi. So the Vice President of Malawi, who was killed in a plane crash on June the 10th. And so I'm just wanted to look at his chart. Again, I don't have a time of birth for him. So his name is Saulos Chilima. And so he was born on February the 12th, 1973 in Nuchao in Malawi at noon. And so without the time of birth, there's information I really would have liked to have had. The fact that he's got Mars, or he had Mars at 29 degrees 7 Capricorn. If he'd been born early in the day, his Mars might have been in Sagittarius, but still he had Mars on the Aries point, or rather Mars square his Aries point. So this was someone who was quite dynamic. I mean, I quickly looked at his biography. I mean, so he's 51 when he was 51 when he died. I think he's been into he was a politician. He has lots of business interests. I think he had been accused of corruption in the past, but the charges were dropped, I think. I mean, again, I don't know much about Malawi. And so there's his Mars, very dynamic. Mars, if it's in Capricorn, is conjunct the North Node, kind of. Moon in Gemini, conjunct Saturn. Having a moon conjunct Saturn, we don't know exactly where his moon was in, but certainly in Gemini, and that may suggest someone who has a lot of variety in their lives. That he can be into business, he can be into politics. I think he even went to England I think he got a PhD from some British university. So he's done lots of stuff. But unfortunately, he died in a plane crash. And so let's sort of consider this plane crash. Let's first of all look at it in terms of his transits. And I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to find anything. Remember, this plane crash is not about him, really, because once you become vice president of a country, and I think if you're in line to become full president, then in a way you do become the tool of the cosmos. You die when the cosmos wants you to die. The cosmos has plans for Malawi. If you're not part of those plans, the cosmos will make sure that you disappear off the scene. And I suppose in this case, it is actually through a plane crash. And I mean, having looked at this chart, well, we can see that he had the North Node is sort of fairly close to a conjunction of his Chiron. So the North Node on his Chiron, well, I suppose literally that is a wound, isn't it? The sense in which he is, well, in this case, he's been obviously killed, but the North Node on his Chiron maybe suggested that this was the end of his healing journey. I don't know how much healing he did in his life, but that was the end of it, and it was time for him to move on. But I don't find this in terms of his transits, I don't find this. One thing, yeah, there is something going on. There's Chiron was at 2238 Aries, so Chiron is opposition his. You can see Chiron is opposition his Uranus. So normally you don't really see Chiron. Chiron is a very minor planet; it's a comet, but and Uranus is a collective planet. For ordinary people, I think an aspect to your Uranus perhaps isn't a big deal. But if you are a politician, a senior politician, then that Chiron opposition, your Uranus, could be a big deal. Now, as far as the plane crash itself, I've just looked at it as transits. I don't find anything particularly convincing here in terms of transits to his horoscope. But looking at the plane crash in isolation. Now, as far as I can see, the plane crash happened at 10 a.m. It probably didn't exactly happen at 10 a.m. I think the last signal from his cell phone was received at 10:30, or the last location was at 10:30. But of course, cell phones can still operate after the crash has happened. But if that is the time, we get this classic signature of an accident, which is Uranus on the midheaven, particularly a plane crash. And indeed, it's Uranus conjunct Algol, Uranus is okay. Uranus is a certain way from Algol yet. Remember, that is the fixed star, the Gorgon's head. And so it is about accidents and disaster, potentially losing one's head, being petrified. And so on that chart, we've kind of got Algol on the midheaven, and we've got Uranus on the midheaven. So there we have, this, as I said, the standard signature of an accident. And what one might also look at is the lunation before the accident. So this is the new moon before the accident happened. It's always something to look at just to see if we can find anything interesting going on. It was a difficult time for the world in general, because you had the new moon hitting, you had the new moon on Venus. Now, some may say that new moon on Venus is a good thing, but I would have said that you could really say that Venus was combust and the moon was combust. So, for many people, it was really quite a difficult time, from what I can see in what people have reported. It wasn't great, and so for Malawi, as in a lot of other parts of the world, it was tough. But I'm not saying that we can pinpoint the accident from the perspective of Malawi in that chart. Not really. But Saturn, you can see that Saturn was square the Sun-Moon midpoint. I suppose Saturn square the Sun, you might say, well, that's death of the leader. But I don't think any leaders have been killed sort of anywhere else. So I'm just showing you that chart just to give you an indication of what we might be looking for. Now, there's one thing one might be interested in is the fact that Saturn is sesquiquadrate the ascendant. So there's Saturn at 1859 Pisces. Remember, Saturn is about to go retrograde. Saturn goes retrograde at the end of June. So in this new moon, so Saturn sesquiquadrate the ascendant does suggest a problem, at least for that place, which I think the place happened close to Mzuzu in Malawi. So that might be where it happened. It would have been very difficult to look at this after the event. Look to see anything before the event. This is really post hoc with 2020 hindsight, but yeah, it is worth noting that Saturn was sesquiquadrate the ascendant. Then there is the horoscope of Malawi. Now, here is Malawi's horoscope. Malawi came into being on July the 6th, 1964. So this is when Malawi got its independence, because it had been a British colony beforehand. And I believe it happened at the stroke of midnight. So this is the chart of Malawi, and there is you can see that it's Sun in Cancer, Moon in Taurus. So what do we notice about that chart? Well, Moon in Taurus. Moon is an important point in any horoscope, and so if you see anything aspecting the moon, then that might suggest problems. So looking at the horoscope of Malawi, and we relate it to the accident. So there is Malawi's moon at 24/4 Taurus. Now, going back to the accident chart, we see on the midheaven Uranus on the midheaven at 24, 24, 24, 25 Taurus. So the Uranus on the midheaven at the time of the accident is picking up Malawi's moon. And so that sort of makes sense. So he died, the president was killed when Uranus was hitting the country's moon. And that indicates that this death is not personal. It's all about Malawi. It's all about Malawi's collective destiny. And I'm sure there are many people in Malawi who are mourning the death of the vice president, that he was sort of a hope for the future. But it wasn't to be. For one reason or another, he wasn't the right person to become president of Malawi, to have any continued impact on Malawian politics. Now, that might not make any sense, but I suppose you could say this is a situation where the universe knows best. And I know that sounds harsh, but what else can we do? And it also just does indicate the risks of becoming a politician. Because as soon as you become a politician, you lose your individuality. Ordinary people, they can have their lives, they can live and die, and it doesn't really make much difference. But when you get to the top of the pile, when you get to the top of the hierarchy, the universe pays keen interest in you, and it is able to sometimes it will make things happen if it doesn't want you to be president, and it's got other ideas about the destiny of Malawi. So those are a few thoughts about the death of Saulos Chilima. And I now want to look at some of the potential picks for Donald Trump, his vice presidential candidate, the running mate. So I believe that the favourite at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, but is Burgum, and he is very rich, and he is the governor of North Dakota, and he is. I think he has worked for Microsoft in the past. He's a tech millionaire. Maybe that's why Trump wants to have him on the ticket, because he is rich. But is he the kind of person that Trump should have on the ticket? Now, Doug Burgum would appear to have a fairly high opinion of himself. He's got Sun in Leo. And he has got a square between Saturn and Pluto. So normally with generational planets, Saturn, and particularly Pluto, it shouldn't really matter. But now that he's a politician, he's governor of North Dakota, he's could be vice president, indeed could be president if he becomes vice president, something happens to Trump. So Saturn and Pluto he's certainly part of a generation that is able to make things happen, but in a very sort of frustrated way. He wants things to happen, and it's tough. Saturn square Pluto. But what we're really interested in is how this impacts Trump. What kind of relationship might he have with Trump? Okay, no, that's the wrong one. Let's go for it. Okay, there is the link between Donald Trump and Doug Burgum. Now, Trump has Mars at 26 Leo, and he's got his ascendant at 29 Leo. So that means that Doug Burgum's Pluto is conjunct Trump's Mars, and therefore his Saturn is square Trump's Mars. To my mind, that on its own should rule Doug Burgum out. I don't know how much contact Doug Burgum and Trump have with each other, but I don't think it's going to be a good relationship. And you have to ask, what impact does Doug Burgum have on Trump? Is it a fortunate impact or an unfortunate impact? I would have said, if anything, it is an unfortunate aspect. I do not like the fact that Doug Burgum's Saturn is square Trump's Mars, that Pluto is conjunct Trump's Mars. So on the basis of that, I would probably rule Doug Burgum out. I don't think that Trump should choose him as his presidential pick. Remember, I'm looking at this whole thing from Trump's perspective. Just a quick question: what is happening on the day of the presidential elections? I don't see anything particularly dramatic happening to Doug Burgum on the day of the presidential elections, for better or for worse. Though, well, Uranus is going to be at 2542 at the time of the elections, pretty close to Algol. So that Uranus is going to be close to his. So he's going to have Uranus opposition his Saturn, Uranus square his Mercury. Do you really want Uranus to be hitting his Mars Saturn square at the time of the election? Remember, I don't have Doug Burgum's time of birth, so there are limits to what I can say. But that doesn't strike me as being particularly positive. Though you could say, well, Mercury will be conjunct his North Node, so maybe that mitigates it a bit. But overall, I'm not convinced that Trump should choose Doug Burgum. Now, another person that people have been talking about is Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio, I don't have his time of birth. So, again, limits to what I can say about Marco Rubio. But Marco Rubio has his Saturn at 27 Taurus. So, going back, just a reminder, Doug Burgum has his Saturn at 2610 Scorpio. So they're sort of around 14 years apart in terms of when they were born. But Marco Rubio's Saturn is square Trump's Mars, and it is square. It is going to be square Trump's ascendant. I don't think that is particularly useful. And of course, this also means that at the time of the election, Uranus is going to be kind of opposition Marco Rubio's conjunct Marco Rubio's Saturn. And I'm just thinking that both these men, Marco Rubio and Doug Burgum, their Saturns are a problem. And I don't think either men is a suitable vice presidential picks for Trump. Then we have Tim Scott. So Tim Scott he's a senator from South Carolina. He has quite an impressive biography. He came from a relatively poor background, and he's been successful in business, and so so there's a kind of a story there. Although some people say that he's not particularly dynamic, and I think that's shown by his chart. A lot of stuff in Virgo and Scorpio. Mars conjunct Neptune in Scorpio. I don't know. I mean, I think the chart itself is is a bit underwhelming, and the moon is definitely in Cancer. A lot of stuff in water, though we don't know where his moon is in Cancer, and this could be important. It's a shame that we don't have his time of birth, but that moon in Cancer is going to be, it's going to be somewhere between approximately 5 or 6 Cancer, and about 18 Cancer. So it is possible that that moon in Cancer is on the United States' moon in Cancer, because sun in Cancer. The US has the US has the sun at 13 Cancer. It has its moon in Aquarius. But so if Tim Scott was born around midday, then his moon would be on the same place as the United States' sun, and I think that would be very useful. We don't see anything at 26, 27 fixed, so we don't see, unlike Rubio and Burgum, we don't have any planets making a bad aspect to Trump's Mars and Trump's ascendant. So in that sense, in a negative way, I would have said that Tim Scott is the better candidate of the three. Not because there's anything necessarily good about his chart, but because he doesn't have the problems that Rubio and Burgum have. And there is another interesting thing about Burgum's chart, and that relates to his Saturn. And there's something really interesting about his Saturn. So this is Tim Scott's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel we have got the positions of the planets at the time of the presidential election on November the 25th, 2024. And Tim Scott's Saturn is at 12 degrees 50 Pisces. And Saturn is going to be at 1246 Pisces. So the presidential election coincides exactly with Tim Scott's Saturn return. We all have our second Saturn return at the time of, in our late 50s. And this is it. So is that good or is it bad? Now, I don't think a Saturn return, when it's so close like this, is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if he loses the election, well, big deal. He tried. Life goes on. He's successful. I suppose does he have to give up his Senate place? I don't think he has. I don't think he has to give up his place in the Senate to be on the ticket. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. In a way, it's not a big deal. If Trump wins the election, and Tim Scott becomes vice president, well, that is a big deal, isn't it? So I'm thinking, regardless of what people say about Tim Scott, I think that Saturn return is interesting. And of the three candidates, if I were to be advising Trump, I would say don't choose Rubio or Burgum for sure, because their Saturns are a problem. That doesn't mean to say Trump can't win the election with Rubio or Burgum on the ticket, but I think they're going to be more of a hindrance than a help. On the other hand, with Tim Scott, it's difficult to say anything really positive about it in terms of his links with Trump, but it's just that Saturn return. I think that's intriguing. And it may be that Saturn return could be linked with him suddenly realizing that he's going to be vice president. That is possible. So of the three, yes, I would say that Trump should go for Tim Scott. I don't know if it'll make any difference, though. So those are some thoughts about the Vice President of Malawi and some vice presidential candidates. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed the video, yes, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.